know that they have to be wholly obtained. So if you're going to grow, if you're going to breed animal here, if you want to qualify within the preferential tariff treatment that we put in place under the AFCF, therefore your animal product must have come from here, from say Nigeria, for instance. Then you have the value of non-originating materials. We need to be able to make sure that we understand how to calculate that. The reason why people don't really know how to calculate, make mistakes under the ETLS, and I would say the National Approval Committee, which oversees the approval of these things with regards to the originating materials. Now, the mistake they're making, people go and inflate all of these things. They inflate it. If you're going to inflate the cost of electricity, when your product gets to South Africa, the guys in South Africa, they would know the cost of electricity here in Nigeria. So if it has been inflated, in order to meet the cost component of the originating material, then of course they could reject it. They will say it has been falsified. And that is one thing that I have been saying, and I said it. We need to get this clearly. A designated competent authority must be clearly sorted out this time so that we get it under CFTA. Those who have the competence to understand and to determine the content of the certificate of roots of origin must be allowed to lead. And I have said this, and I would say it again: the customs and then other competent organs of government should be part of that designated competent authority. I am not saying that an organization cannot lead on this, but when one organization leads on this, what then would happen is it will give room to abuse and, of course, rejection. Because who is LCCI? We do understand that LCCI has the competence and mandate on issues relating to commerce and including industrialization and all of and trade. But do they have the legal or the statutory authority to approve what goes into the certificate of origin? That would be the question. And I think that's why we must get it very, very clearly in Nigeria this time on the constituents of the designated competent authority. I have said in that body, there should be customs, wouldn't mind to be there as just for guidance. We don't want to be the approval. We just want to be there for guidance. And then other bodies as well, CBN and all of that should be part of that designated competent authority. But customs should lead on this. Perhaps LCCI might also be there. We need to have it right this time. It's important that we have it right. So that because the competent authority will determine actually the acceptability of a certificate of roots of origin. It will. I perhaps might be speaking for please, if I'm speaking for too long, please just let me know. and then trade facilitation mechanism. We need to be able to have that. That's top notch. That is really, really top. We need to look at our borders, the congestion of our borders, the time spent to cross one border to the other border, the number of days, and taking into account perishable products, for instance. How long does it take for you for a truckload of banana to pass between semi border, and into Benin or to Nigeria? How long would it take? If it takes more than 2 days, then it doesn't work, because those bananas will perish. And who's going to bear them? And what happens when those products perish? It means that individual or that organization can no more invest, can no more be in business. So to be able to be in business, we need to look at time at and I've also said that we need to create a period because it's bad. So we also have to take it is serious for economies, market, supply. It's very serious. So we have to really benefit from this. That doesn't mean that one person or one individual has to do everything. I know that you're coming to tell me that. How many minutes?
The President, um, Your Excellencies here present, High Commissioner of Kenya to Nigeria, the High Commissioner of Tanzania to Nigeria, the Secretary General of the African Continental Area Secretariat, Mr. Wamkelemene, senior government officials here, the Acting Chief Negotiator and Director General of Nigerian Office for Trade Negotiations, Governor on SDG, my sister, Mrs. Shalape Hamad, Is catalyst for Nigeria's export diversification by providing preferential access for Nigerian products and services to the huge African market, which currently sources 85% of imports from outside the continent. It effectively creates a single market in Africa with a size of 1.3 billion people and combined GDP of 3.4 trillion. It is an opportunity that we must take advantage of. It is interesting because Africa demands finished products and Nigeria aspires to industrialize and progress beyond export of commodities. It also provides immense opportunities for Nigerian companies to expand in Africa, especially those in financial services, e-commerce, and the digital economy, where we have already built immense domestic capacities. It will eliminate tariffs on 90% of tradable goods, and it will also expand market access for Nigerian exporters of goods, which will in turn catalyze local production and job creation. It includes a development agenda and includes a dispute resolution mechanism for dealing with predatory trade practice, which has been a perennial issue for us. It supports our industrial policy through the negotiated and agreed exclusion and sensitive category lists to provide space for Nigerian infant industries and a platform for our SMEs. It will facilitate integration into the regional economy and accelerate women empowerment and thereby provide a connection to regional and continental value chains. Therefore, this will therefore strengthen economic integration, lower transaction costs, and facilitate payments, especially with the introduction of ECO and development of an African-wide payment system. As with other developmental initiatives, AFCFTA is without its challenges. In the short run, there could be a threat to the survival of infant industries, as established industries will be able to scale up operations more easily, but this will slowly disappear as smaller firms are incentivized to take up this challenge and scale up. Obviously, the more diversified economies with better infrastructure will benefit more from the trade integration in the short term. Nigeria lags in this area, but given the huge amount of investment the federal government is making in the infrastructure space, Nigeria is poised to harness the gains in the medium term. We are aware that goods made in other continents could be disguised as made in Africa to qualify for duty-free treatment. However, we have already started building specific safeguards to mitigate this challenge. Indeed, paradigm shifts are required to attract investment for trade under AFCFTA. Some of these are critical not only for attracting investment, but also for successful realization of the goals of the AFCFTA. The first shift must be focused on implementation. Already a lot has been achieved, a lot is ongoing, and we still have a lot to do to operationalize the agreement. For instance, the rules of origin provisions must work as designed and efficiently too. Mutual recognition agreements must be in place for ease of trade in services. We must harmonize standards, policies, and regulations. Secondly, there is full agreement that the AFCFTA must be led by the private sector. For many, if not all African countries, this will require stakeholders across the spectrum to reappraise their roles and responsibilities. Government needs to refocus on updating policies and regulations to position the private sector for success. The private sector, on the other hand, needs to take more responsibility for advocacy, information and data sharing, and other forms of decision support to ensure that the right policies and regulations emerge. We must start taking business and market development seriously, as this is a critical requirement for market access for Nigerian products and services. In this area, we must build strong business matchmaking capabilities. And this is one area we will particularly want to work with Lagos Chamber of Commerce and other chambers of commerce to develop and sustain. We need a strong national brand that sets us apart from the rest of Africa. We'll achieve suboptimal results unless we mobilize all economic actors at every level of the society for AFCFTA. Based on these realizations, one of the emerging strategic pillars of our national strategy for AFCFTA is building economically viable communities. And our ongoing nationwide sensitization program and subnational engagement is focused on galvanizing state government to aspire to become top producer, exporter of a product or service to Africa. Yet another area that requires paradigm shift is enforcement of rules and regulations. And we need to do this both at domestic level, at regional, and continental level. Suffice to say that the economy has sufficient considerations and incentives to minimize undesired outcomes. Nigeria is committed to full and successful implementation of the AFCFTA agreement. His Excellency President Muhammad Buhari inaugurated the National Action Committee on 20th December 2019. This committee, which is jointly chaired by myself and the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, increase production of goods and services for domestic consumption and export in Africa. We will also be implementing programs to aggregate SMEs for export trade. The fourth is the power and trade logistics infrastructure pillar. This will focus on for Africa. Five, Nigerian products and services to take Nigerian products Nigerian business with their African counterparts. And like you said earlier, this is an area we're looking forward to working with our chambers of commerce. Quality infrastructure improvement cannot be overemphasized. For indeed, even with the liberalization of tariffs, the harmonization of policies, if our products don't meet the quality standards, they will be rejected at the entry ports. The skills and human development is another, and an entire workforce with technical, science, technology, engineering, and math skills, but also growing their productivity to compete with the rest of Africa. Indeed, we will be developing our people, not just for the Nigerian market, but for the African market.
Of Mr. Benga Ismail. You're welcome, sir. Good to have you. We also have another Vice President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry in the person of Mrs. Bamidele Daramola. Good to have you, madam. Next, we have the keynote address by His Excellency the Secretary General of the AFCFTA. Please bear with us. Our technical team is trying to connect to it. His Excellency is being with us all along.
Yes, I'm connected.
Good to have you. You're welcome. Now,
thank you very much.
You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Program Director. I greet you from Nairobi, Kenya. It's a pleasure for me to participate in this event. I would have wished to be there in person, but I had an urgent matter that arose in Kenya, in Nairobi, and so I have to join you virtually. Let me start by thanking the President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as the executives of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the government of Nigeria for arranging this event and for inviting me to speak today. I wish to recognize all of the excellencies and ambassadors, high commissioners that are in the room, as well as those who are participating virtually. And I also wish to recognize the Acting Director General of the Nigerian Office of Trade Negotiations and Chief Negotiator, Mr. Victor Liman, as well as other distinguished guests and speakers. As one of the oldest chambers in Africa and a key stakeholder and beneficiary of the AFCFTA in Nigeria, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry has a lot to offer to the continent in ensuring the success of the AFCFTA. I have made this point repeatedly, that small medium enterprises are the real traders, the real investors, and the real job creators who are responsible for moving goods and services across borders. To achieve the success and implementation of the AFCFTA, all member states must actively engage with the private sector to allow them to share their experiences and also to find solutions to practical problems that they may confront. I commend the Nigeria Office of Trade Negotiations under the leadership of the Acting Director General, Mr. Victor Liman, for the extensive consultations they have embarked upon in the lead up to the signature of the AFCFTA and ratification in December 2020. Nigeria remains at the heart of my plans to mobilize the continent towards AFCFTA implementation. Being the largest economy on the African continent, the AFCFTA, quite frankly, will be incomplete without Nigeria's full participation and leadership. In this regard, I have visited twice since September last year. I have visited Nigeria, and I have held consultations with the private sector, with the ministers of trade, of finance, as well as Minister of Foreign Affairs, with a view to providing assurances to Nigeria about some of the legitimate concerns that Nigeria expressed, particularly in relation to transshipment of goods. In my recent visit to Lagos, I had an opportunity to meet with the president and the executives of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, where amongst other things, we discussed how to involve the private sector in the implementation and rollout of the AFCFTA. I intend to fully implement the concrete outcomes of that conversation. The private sector is a major engine for sustainable economic growth and development. Private sector's contribution to the African economy is estimated as follows: 4/5 of total production, 2/3 of total investment, and 90% of the employed working age population are all in the private sector. This is to say that in Africa, the private sector accounts for 80% of the total production. In addition, 90% of the firms within the African private sector are micro, small, and medium enterprises. These businesses' participation in cross-border trade is at the moment very limited due to tariffs, non-tariff barriers, which include complex customs and trade procedures, lack of access to finance, high transit and transportation costs, and a lack of access to information, amongst others. Therefore, the elimination of tariffs and other duties and charges on trade amongst African countries on the broadest possible basis has the potential to increase export opportunities for Nigerian traders in Africa. The AfCFTA will enhance export opportunities for Nigerian service providers as well, enabling them to compete on a more level playing field in other African countries. The AfCFTA promotes mutual recognition of professional qualifications such as lawyers, architects, accountants, etc. And it aims to reduce restrictions that discriminate against Nigerian service providers when accessing other markets on the African continent. A number of financial services providers operate in other African countries. Under the AfCFTA and under the leadership of the Chief Trade Negotiator of Nigeria, Nigeria, in my view, has a lot to benefit in the area of services, market expansion, and investment in other parts of the African continent. In view of the importance of different stakeholders to the success of the AfCFTA, I have directed the Secretariat that we should intensify our engagement with stakeholders, multi-stakeholders, including business, academic, parliaments, and civil society networks. I've also encouraged my colleagues at the AfCFTA Secretariat to engage stakeholders so that the AfCFTA can reach out to millions and millions across the length and breadth of the African continent so that the AfCFTA becomes truly a people-centered agreement. Now, let me brief you on the state of play. We at the moment have 55 countries on the African continent, and out of those, 54 have signed the agreement. Out of 55 countries, 36 have ratified the agreement. They have expressed by ratification that they accept the legal obligations to open their markets, to reduce barriers to trade, and to reduce barriers to intra-Africa investment. We have been given by heads of states up until June to conclude the outstanding work on rules of origin and also on tariff negotiations. But I'm pleased to say that 80 to 81% of work on rules of origin has already been completed. What is outstanding are the areas of automobiles, sugar, and textiles and clothing. Rules of origin will be very, very important for Africa's industrialization prospects. We in the Secretariat, and certainly in my capacity as Secretary General, do not intend to make room or allow space for transshipment of goods to come into the AfCFTA market. We do not want countries to import into the AfCFTA market, import a shirt, put a button on it, and say made in the AfCFTA. That is why the rules of origin that we have negotiated and crafted have a relatively high requirement for value addition so that we foster industrialization on the African continent. That means that we will have to work very, very closely with our customs authorities to make sure that we prevent transshipment of goods coming in from third countries, that we have the requisite capacity at our borders to make sure that we prevent fraudulent invoicing and all the other criminal activity that is related to customs procedures. Because we know that the impact of all of this, of fraudulent invoicing or transshipment of goods, is market displacement in the domestic market. and job losses in the domestic market. I am determined to make sure that we prevent and we mitigate transshipment of goods into the AfCFTA market. But this is not something we can do alone as a secretariat. We will have to work very closely with customs authorities, as I've just mentioned. And that is why I have created the position of Director for Customs Coordination and Capacity Building and Enforcement, so that we begin to tackle head-on, this problem of transshipment of goods and the causes that it has and the impact that it has on our ambition for industrialization on the African continent. We have also started the process of appointing a senior officer who will be our lead officer for private sector engagement, because I believe that we have to have an ongoing dialogue with the private sector on the African continent. And in fact, I will make sure that we have through this ongoing dialogue and platform, that we have regular interaction with the private sector. This agreement was not negotiated for governments. This agreement was negotiated for the private sector, because it is the private sector that creates jobs, that creates investment, that invests in innovation, in research and development, and that invests in the future of our continent. It is therefore of absolute critical of our continent that as we implement this agreement, it is absolutely critical that we bring in the private sector as part of an implementation pillar of the agreement. I wish to conclude by saying the road ahead is going to be very difficult. Implementation of this AfCFTA, one of the largest free trade areas in the world, is not going to be easy. We should expect challenges. We should expect that some countries will not be able to move as fast as others, but we should all adhere to one ultimate objective, and that is to create jobs on the African continent, to industrialize our continent, to make sure that the future of the continent and young people, the future of the continent and young people is captured by this AfCFTA. I thank you very much for the opportunity this morning. I would have wished to be there in person in Lagos, but as I mentioned earlier, there was an urgent matter that arose in Nairobi with the highest office here, and so I was required to be here today. I thank you very much, and I wish you very good deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. Thank you for joining us virtually in this event. Next, we are gradually coming to the crux of the matter, where we have the panel discussion, insights, thoughts, interventions, and the roadmap to a successful implementation of the AfCFTA. So it's my pleasure to welcome to the podium the moderator of today's panel discussion. It's no other than Professor Chris Obeche, Dean, Lagos Business School. Please, let's give him a warm welcome. Next, we also have joining us virtually the President of MAN, in the person of Engineer Mansour Ahmed, is joining us virtually. Please, can we also give him a round of applause? Also, we have the High Commissioner of Kenya to Nigeria, Ambassador Dr. Wilfred Macheje. Please, you're welcome, sir. We have the CEO, Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Mr. Laoye Jayola, who is also joining us virtually. Please, let's give him a round of applause. Next, we have the Special Advisor to the Lagos State Governor on SDGs, Mrs. Sholakwe Amond. Please, let's give her a round of applause. Also, we have joining us in the panel discussion, the representative of Nigerian Customs in the person of Mr. Anthony Ayalogu is joining us virtually as well. Please, let's give him a wonderful welcome. And also we have the High Commissioner of Tanzania to Nigeria, Dr. Benson Alfred Bana. Then the man at the center of it all in Nigeria, it's my pleasure to also welcome Mr. Victor Liman to join in the discussion. You're welcome, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Yes, so at this point, my assignment is almost over. I would like to hand the microphone over to the moderator. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Or do you want to have coffee break so that you can recharge your batteries? Okay, let's. In terms of rules of engagement, I'll ask each panelist to say a few words, and then I can direct certain questions to any of them and ask members of the audience to also direct the questions. But before I do that, I would like to point out that AFTA is not the first big single market. The European economic blocks in West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa. But this is the first time we are trying to bring and make it a one market of about 1.3 billion people. And why is this so? Because from what Mr. Lehman told us, we are very, very, very far behind in terms of intra-trade. Africa is talking of between 13 and 15% intra-trade, which means others are making more money with us. Europe is talking of 60% intra-trade. North America, 40%. Asia, 30%. Why is this so? We can actually up our game. Let's not forget that we have within Africa some of the fastest growing economies in the world today. We have a very large and young workforce. Some may see it as a problem, but many of us see it as a big asset, an important asset for that matter. And the population is growing. Above all, we have arable land. The population is driven digitally. So if you look at the penetration of internet, the use of digital media, digitalization in Africa is growing. ACTA could be a solution to it. But unfortunately, it is not just an economic issue. It's also a political issue and even a social issue. And implementation will be critical. We are not short of policy statements or policies. One of the biggest problems we encounter in many African countries are inability to implement or execute flawlessly, because flawless execution of this could be our own competitive advantage. The other is massive infrastructure implementation key performance indicators. Saying, are we actually moving in the right direction? A lot has been said about MSMEs driving economies. Unfortunately, our financial services sector in Africa as a whole is not geared towards driving MSMEs. We don't have venture capitalists. And if we rely on our commercial banking system the way it is today, we will not make any headway. And that means we have to think of other ways of financing MSMEs if we really have to make significant progress. PPP, public-private partnership, has eluded us for a very long time. Even here in Nigeria, we are still trying to make it work. And one of the big factors capacity building will be critical. And this is where business schools like mine have a role to play. Capacity building for MSMEs, capacity building for big organizations. Let's not forget that MSMEs are also part of the ecosystem of most big companies. We need to help African multinational companies to manage their growth, to be able to provide, to have the leadership capacity to operate in a multicultural environment. And most importantly, we need to develop social entrepreneurs. In most cases, we're talking of MSMEs, and we don't look at it from the social entrepreneurship dimension, because social entrepreneurs actually solve social problems and at the same time make money. And we are inundated by a mirage of social problems in Africa. If we can solve them, we'll grow our economy. So let me start by asking His Excellency, the High Commissioner of Kenya, to pass a few comments. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Most of Africa attained its independence in the late 50s and early 60s, except for a few. Our independence fathers had a dream, most of which arose from West Africa. Kwame Nkrumah, Pan-Africanism, Jomo Kenyatta, Julius Nyerere, Milton Obote, and the others, Nnamdi Azikiwe. Their dream was not only to attain political independence, but all the other independences, either by design or omission. Africa only concentrated on political independence, and hence the creation of neocolonialism, where we were again made captive to our forefathers on other matters, including and paramount economic dependence. They brought in Anglophone countries, Francophone countries, I don't know what countries, just to divide us. But a treaty was created by the former leaders, very well captured in 1991, which had this dream of the African independence on matters of trade and economy. Indeed, 2012, African presidents met in Ethiopia and came up with about 52 countries who signed the pact. The values have been very well enumerated by the chair. I don't want to go so much into that. But it's important to note that the African Free Trade Area will cover 1.2 billion people with a gross domestic product of 2.5 billion at a trillion. And this just by looking at 55 member states. And it will increase, as per now, our ability of trade between 15 and 17%. If we compare to the figures the chair has given, how Europe, Asia has benefited, still attain the 70% that is being brought by Europe. If we harmonize ourselves and grow this new baby. I don't have to emphasize that the per capita income of Africans, and especially people poor, is far less than $5 per day. This could increase, and hence elimination of other problems, disease, low education, and so on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to call on the High Commissioner of Tanzania, Nigeria, Dr. Bana, for his own opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Professor Chris, the panelist chair, Your Excellency, Madam President, Lagos Chamber of Commerce, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I first thank the organizers of this event for granting us the opportunity to say a word or two in connection of African Continent Free Trade Area. I must declare the interest and question of political will is required among our African leaders. Pregnancy. You can't say that I am 50% committed, I am 70%. No, commitment is total. You are either committed or you are not. I challenge African countries to show commitment by this. There are still a number of mistrusts that really show that cooperation among blocs of African countries within ECOWAS, within the East African Community, within SADC, within COMESA, within EGAD, there are some still few things that needs to be firmed up before we even come to embrace with vim and rigor the imperatives of the African free trade agreement. So this is very important. We challenge our political leadership in echelons of power to think again and seriously the imperatives that come with African free trade agreement. There are a number of doubting Thomases. We need them to create a conducive environment that will make African continent free trade area. Thomases have got to be clear. My brother alluded to it. We have a Francophone Africa. We have an Anglophone Africa. We have a Lusophone Africa. We have Africans, African continent, which identify themselves as the Arab world. Unless we bring these sentiments together, benefits and futures of the African continent free trade area, I doubt the success, the good stories that we are taught, the best objective that the organ have may be jeopardized. So a supportive environment is required. And one of those is to struggle to create a homogeneous Africa. And how do you do this? By at least to harmonize customs, to get rid of insecurity sentiments that surround our countries. And from this end, the United Republic of Tanzania is strongly urging African continent to embrace our nation Franco, our national language, Kiswahili, to be part of the language that will contribute enormously to the unification of the African continent. If we don't speak the same language, if we want to refer on the same chapter, with the same understanding, divisions in Africa will continue to grow. And as we struggle to embrace the benefits and features of African continent free trade area, our adversaries are watching, and they don't let us get free of Francophone, get free of Anglophone, get free of Francophone, get free of Lusophone. They will continue to dominate. So we need to come together holistically, a partial approach to continental integration, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I like to online panelists? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
At this stage, I'd like to call my good friend, Engineer Mansur Ahmed. Can you hear us?
Yes, I
Engineer
can.
Ahmed?
I hope you can hear me too.
Yes, friends, I would like to at this stage, you are the president of MAN. From your own perspective, what role can the manufacturing sector play in ensuring effective implementation of AFTA? And what are your fears? What are the things you expect
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me. Let me thank the LCCI for this invitation, and particularly for putting together this forum for discussing what is clearly a very, very important development in Africa. Let me also thank particularly His Excellency Mr. Wamkele, and of course my friend Francis, and other speakers who have spoken and highlighted some of the key issues that I think we really need to give attention to. First of all, let me say that I would like to focus on 4 key issues. You will recall that at the beginning of the active implementation or assigning of the AFCFTA, there was a lot of emotion and sentiment and a wave of premature excitement that Africa is coming together and so on and so forth. And to a large extent, many of our partners in other African countries rushed to sign this agreement. And at that time, I believe that in Nigeria, many people felt that the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria was like throwing a wet blanket on the whole thing by saying, look, let us first of all think through what does this major step in our continental and regional as well as domestic economies going to mean? How is it going to impact our lives and indeed our economies and the prosperity of our people? What do we need to do to make sure that it works for all of us? And I believe that that was indeed what delayed Nigeria's signing of this agreement in 2018. But I'm glad that even from the discussion that we have had this morning, we can see that 3 things are happening. First of all, we are beginning now to be more realistic. Some dose of realism is coming to force. We now recognize that this is not a dash, this is a long journey, and that indeed along the way, there are going to be many hurdles we have to cross. But we do recognize that the destination is indeed worth the effort. And therefore, I believe this is bringing together Africans and indeed across the world, people who are interested in the progress of Africa to be able to work together to make it work. But it is not going to be easy. I think that has now been recognized, and that is very important. Secondly, I want to recognize and thank His Excellency Mr. Wamkele for highlighting something that we have always said over the past 2 years or so. We have said that if AFCFTA is to work, the focus of Africa, the focus of our countries and our political leaders, as well as our leaders in the business sector, must be to focus on industrialization of Africa. Because until we industrialize, the opportunity to expand trade across Africa and to improve Africa's contribution to global trade will be missed. And I'm very delighted that indeed Mr. Wamkele highlighted this, that we must focus on building strong industrial base and taking advantage of the opportunities of our coming together to build this across the continent. Thirdly, I think he has also highlighted the fact that as we know today, the trade, intra-African trade, is mostly undertaken by particularly small and medium enterprises. And therefore, what we must do in the process is indeed to make sure that this sector of our economies is given due attention. How can we improve the capacity of our SMSEs to trade? These are all the issues I think that really, if we put together, we will indeed achieve the objectives of AFCFTA. I think particularly with regards to the process itself, it has already been clearly indicated that there are a lot of issues we still have to solve, but that is not to say that we could not proceed. So my feeling is that there are at least 4 key steps we must take. First of all, in the short term, we must work on ensuring that the rules of engagement are clearly understood by all, not just the government, not just operators of the economy, not just regulators of our economy, but also the traders themselves, those that will be traded, the private sector. And that is why I thank Mr. Wankele for highlighting the fact that at the end of the day, trading is indeed done by the private sector, by private sector actors. And therefore, engagement between our public sector and our private sector must be sustained and indeed scaled up continuously. That is why I think we must thank LCCI for creating an opportunity set of this. I believe there must be more and more interactions and consultations and dialogue on how to make AFCFTA work. That must be led by the private sector. Secondly, it is clear that until the rules are designed for Africa, until the rules recognize the impediments that we're facing, and that they are designed to make sure that we develop these rules to make sure that they work for us, I think we are going to have it. That is why I'm glad, as Francis said, that a lot of these issues, particularly rules of origin, the market access matter, the dispute resolution arrangement, we must spend time. We must work on them. We must understand them. We must make them work for our continent and for our people. Lastly, I think obviously in the medium term, we must also focus on those issues that will impede or accelerate trade. Quality infrastructure has been mentioned. Trade facilitation arrangements, harmonization of the rules and regulations across our countries, and the development of a financial system, particularly payment systems that will make AFCFTA work and work for Africa. And lastly, if I can take another minute, in the longer term, we must also, and this is where I think our public sector leaders, our political leaders must really be more focused. We must build the capacity to build our ability to produce, our ability to add value. And therefore, going forward, we must begin to work together continentally and regionally to develop the value chains that will scale up the capacity to produce and to trade in what we produce. I believe that if we focus on these areas, we will indeed be able to make steady progress towards an effective implementation of AFCFTA in Africa. Let me stop here and come back later. Thank you. Hello?
Jayola, are you around?
I am around.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, moderator. And again, I want to thank the President and Chairman of Council of the LCCI, and I want to stand on established protocol and to add just a few initial comments to all that have been said. I will just play around data and to say the fact that do we need the FTA? Long ago, even the founding fathers of the OAU that now metamorphosed into AU recognized that that was a step we're all going to come to. And when the Abuja declaration was had, we all know that we're going to come to it. And moderators, sir, when they were starting, you talked about ECOWAS, you talked about the CODASEP region, the SADC region, all of these sub-regional relationship already existed before the ACFTA. But how well have we done, even in our own various sub-regional level? What are the things that have impeded the effective working of all of these arrangements? And even where we had a lot of write-ups. So to the extent that those challenges persist, none of us should think that a mere signing of the ACFTA agreement is eureka. And as a matter of fact, we all know, and data prove it, that the tariff and non-tariff barriers exist, that even if you remove all tariffs, they will only contribute to 3% growth in African trade. Only 3%. Like you did say, what we do amongst ourselves is very little, 10%. Even in Nigeria, 80% of our input and output are done outside of Africa. It means therefore that while tariff might be a problem, the non-tariff issues are very, very critical. And Engineer Mansour had alluded to the things that we need to do in the area of having a rule set. But I will talk about the fact that if really we want to work on this as a continent, we need to define exactly, we need to have the political will. And it's the political will to making this work that is a challenge. And I want to comment the fact that other countries are taking it more seriously than the other. And the thing that pains is that whilst other countries do preparation and the other people are not doing, you then find out that we drag ourselves behind. And speaking to Nigeria, I will say Nigeria being the largest economy in ECOWAS and about the largest city in Africa, would need to be Nigeria and South Africa and a few of those countries would need to take the lead. For us in Nigeria, we need to begin to hasten what we're doing around our trade. We need to begin to see how do we scale non-oil export. We talk about industrialization. You know, how do we scale non-oil export? Backward integration to make sure we work with our MSMEs, to make sure we work with our people. But beyond trade, beyond manufacturing and co, what can we do to ensure the service industry is made to work? What do we do around areas of investment? So these are the laws that we need to look at to make sure they work very, very well. But above all, we need to find a way of gathering data, analyzing data, until we begin to trickle down those data and look at how do things like CFTA engender increased business amongst ourselves? How does it affect household? How does it lift up people out of poverty? How do we make up much more inclusive as a people? Then we will not be able to sing that music to our people. And why I say this, and which I want us to look at, is that despite the fact that globalization was beneficial to even most of the developed countries, you are seeing now that as a result of populism, many nations that open their country to globalization and now begin to look at how do we shut down. The reason being that some people felt left behind. So it is important for us to know that even if CFTA starts and we do all the best that we can do, unless there is a reasonable level of inclusion, unless that we carry people along, people are still going to come up and say, we can't go forward. So we need a lot of data gathering to mine the data to ensure that the intended policies are being achieved and we are reaching out to the people we need to talk to. Now, we reach, of course, as Nigeria work on our national standards. And lastly, lastly, we need to talk about infrastructure. And like I will talk, Nigeria, we need to make our environment friendly enough to attract investment. Other nations are doing that to attract investment. Even when we get all these rules right, the people that are prepared will take advantage of it, and the winners and losers. My initial remark is that what can we do to ensure that Nigerians are not losers?
Would say primarily around creating decent work and economic growth, which the entire world very sorely needs. So this is really good that Africa is doing this at this point in time. Also very key to industry innovation and infrastructure. We know that creating Africa when the challenges that we tend to have $1 million as it takes to, and in Africa is too small, except the financial services sector, which we've done fantastic well with, a few large manufacturing companies, but very many things are too small. If to aggregate that scale, then suddenly Africa is able to with everyone else around the world. So it is extremely critical. I think I really end with the lose in terms of, I think Engineer Master said very well, initial euphoria, but do need to settle down, think through strategically and build policies that will ensure that Africa can actually deliver on this promise. I think Mr. Lyman also mentioned the fact that competence is so key. And I love some of the things that he said, effective corridors of competence as well. I think one of the new that also have to still remain able to compete with the rest of the world. One of the areas that for me I'm very excited about is the services sector. I think we need to look, I think for me, the first is full information. That's still an area where there needs to be a lot more work. And I think Engineer Mansur again said it very, very well. This needs to be clear to the level, not just of national or even large businesses, but it has to be clear to every trader, every small business, to every individual who is even buying. You know, we have to have full information. We have to have a good understanding of what rules are, of what the rules are, of what the processes are, what the procedures are, so that it's fairer. Because the level of the competition that's going to elevate us, as has been said, is at that micro, small level. And so it's important that pressure this is done and everybody's clear. We also need fresh eyes, not just from the perspective of kinds of things we're doing now with Africa, but the kinds of things that we can begin to do once we have one large single market. And you know, we have to shout out to the digital and startup sector. We've seen the amazing news that came Flutterwave yesterday, payments for African businesses and the global businesses to compete internationally. And those are the sorts of things that we're looking for. And that's the sort of thing that makes our businesses become global businesses. As we evolve and we're creating global cities for an African global. So again, talk about currency issue, payments, so simplifying payments. I know West Africa did that really well about 15 years ago with the Ramsey process. It's very important that we look at a Pan-African solution around currency acceptability and convertibility, payments, capital markets, and some of those other solutions. I think another thing that hasn't been mentioned is the legal framework that's going to underpin this. When individuals and traders across borders start having challenges, where will these issues be resolved? How can these issues be resolved more easily? I think that, of course, enforcing contracts, all these things become very, very critical. And I think it's good that more than 50% of the countries in Africa have now signed up to the World Bank Ease of Doing Business rankings. But I think it's extremely critical that we start to look at the non-World Bank ranking items, so things around security and other aspects that are very important to doing business, not just the procedural activities. I think the last thing I'll do is just talk about, just the fact that it's extremely fortuitous that this timing that we now have our own DG at the WTO. Incidentally, she's now here in Nigeria making a visit, which I think is a really, really great sign of how things are going to go. And perhaps The big role of the WTO will not be around creating those multilateral intervention or interactions, but perhaps enabling our new similar zones that we're trying to create around the world to be able to do better within themselves and help us to set up the frameworks and structures that we need. So I think those would be the opening comments from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Before we go back to our online people, I'd like to ask Victor one or two questions. Victor, you gave us a insightful presentation. We know for the success of AFTAC, we must have free movement of people, goods, and money. What kind of framework do we need to have in place to make this possible if we are to achieve our goals?
Right, just permit me to sit there, but because I can't speak with the mic. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you once again, Mr. Moderator, and of course the President, and those joining us online. I think there are a couple of things that we need to look at, and we've all looked at a lot of fundamental critical components of what would drive the implementation of FCFTA in Africa in much more seamless, commercially meaningful, beneficial way. But there are also some areas that I think we must be aware of. I should bring to your notice, having been visions of the FCFTA agreement. Perhaps, for instance, she's mentioned the special advisor on STG to the Lagos government has mentioned payment systems. Fortunately, we have the Pan-African Payment Settlement System, which is managed by Afrexim Bank. Now, this is good news. The reason why it's good news is that we are able to trade with our local currencies wherever we are, without necessarily having go to the Forex to look for, so able to determine the settlement currency, how you want to get paid. You could trade with Naira and then tell Afrexim Bank, I would like to receive shillings, or like to receive CFA, or I'd like to receive dollars or Dutch marks or euros. Platform that hosts more than 40 something currencies. Yeah, so that's already been taken care of. Then digital transformation. Before COVID, and of course at the advent of COVID, we've seen how digital transformation, the effect of digital transformations in the way that we do business in Nigeria, in Africa. Without digitization, without digital trade, it would have been almost impossible to trade during COVID because there was total lockdowns. You can remember across Nigeria and across the world. And of course, export restrictions were triggered immediately. So we need to build on the capacity that we have. We have great potentials when it comes to digital transformation and of course tools and art in Nigeria. So we have to keep building on that. We have to make sure that we have the right policies to encourage our young people to innovate and to drive technology as well. We've looked at issues of Luxophones, Francophones, Anglophones, and of course the Arabics. And these goes back to colonial legacies. We need to address colonial legacies. That balkanize Africa into blocks, and by so doing, drive continues till tomorrow. We all are aware the FCFTA is a contractual framework with the balance of rights and obligations. You are required to ensure you benefit from the rights, but also you have an obligation to ensure that you uphold the agreement. That means making sure that there is free movement of persons across the continent, making sure that we address xenophobia, which is going to be one of the biggest thing that can actually mar the FTA. If we are not allowed to come into countries to be able to trade, if a Nigerian cannot trade in Kenya, if a Kenyan cannot trade in Nigeria, and vice versa, then we have a problem. So it has to be, I mean, we have to know that the AfCFTA is a contract, and that we must enforce, and that we must ensure that we comply with. And then robust engagement of financial technology companies through effective regulations, making sure to close the loopholes and associated risks that comes with them. We know that young men, young women, you know, this is their core. They enjoy technology. Fintechs companies and firms are mostly owned by very young people. But again, there are associated risks and loopholes that we must look at. I remember a lot of talk about the CBN's step to ensure that what Bitcoin is properly regulated. It's a good step because you have to, first of all, a lot of countries are grappling with how to regulate Bitcoin. As you know, Bitcoin, it's an algorithm-based currency. And whoever controls the code controls everything. So if you are going to trade on Bitcoin, then we should be able to have a conversation around who controls and regulates the code or the algorithms. And then we must have what to trade. Of course, if you don't have what to trade, what they need going into a free trade agreement. So we need to have what to trade. We have a development bank. Perhaps we might also need to have a trade bank or trade and development bank, because we're talking about trade financing, and we're also looking at infrastructure financing. If you don't have the the money to finance trade and infrastructure, then there's a problem. My brother is coming to me. Don't worry, I'll be done very soon. And then strict adherence to the rules of origin framework and criteria. This is important. We must strictly adhere to it. We must not, I mean, countries should not be allowed to bring shirts from wherever they bring it from, third countries, and put buttons on those shirts and tag them made in whatever country and ship them to Nigeria. As you know, Nigeria is the biggest market, 200 and something million people. Nigeria, as a matter of fact, must target the trade share per capita within the 1.2 billion market size that we're talking about. What would be Nigeria's trade share per capita? Divided by that. So what if we cannot capture parts of that maximally? The number of the size of that market as the biggest economy, as the biggest market, then it's a share waste of them, because I do know without Nigeria participating in the AfCFTA, then there would not be AfCFTA. Let's be very frank. There would not be any successful implementation of the AfCFTA or the conclusion of the AfCFTA. I remember we used to say this during negotiation, that Nigeria needs to come on board because we have the biggest economy. And I think we need to be able to ensure that we drive this and we have that enlightened self-interest. While we drive this for our benefits, we also drive this for the success of other countries across Africa. And quality and standards, this is key. There's a lot of politics, not in Nigeria, on quality and standard issues across the globe. Countries use quality and standard to send back your products, agricultural, food, whatever they are. But it's key. We need to ensure that we get this one right. But within the domestic market, and of course at the international market, area restrictions that says you can't come to this market because your goods are substandard. And then let me just say this. If you look at our services growth, per capita, per GDP, in 2018, it was 53.4% of our GDP of services, which means it's growing incrementally. Then if you look at during the COVID era, services has not been seriously affected, in particular e-commerce. It has not been seriously affected. So it keeps growing. And then someone then asked me a question once and said, okay, if we have services growing incrementally and adding more to our GDP, why then should we focus on trading goods? And I said to the person, you know what? If you are going to allow someone else to fit you, to clothe you, to build a house for you, to make your cars, then you are doomed. Goods are they're associated with our security and sovereignty as a country. Although services is growing, it's one of the largest portion of our GDP, but we need to focus on these key components. Goods, we need them, because without capturing this, we'll be there. And so, my brother, I think I would leave the mic back to you at this point. Thank you so much. And
thank you, Victor. I'll call on, we'll just have 5 minutes to round up, and I'll call on the online panelists. Let me start with the representative of Nigerian Customs Services, Mr. Anthony Ayalogu. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Are you on?
Yes, I'm on. I've been listening since the beginning. Good morning, everyone. I hear we have 5 minutes, so I have to be very fast in this my contribution. Let me I try to rely on existing protocols and just go straight to the point. Nigeria Customs Service are implementers of the AFTA, just as we also implemented ETLS. And our duties are just simple. One, we are supposed to be members of the designated competent authority that will approve the product and also register the exporter. We will create a procedure in our system that will process after imports and exports. And also during the imports, we also accept or reject a certificate of origin arising from other countries. And in so doing, we'll be able to process our Nigerian traders so that they can be acceptable in other customs administration. This is what we are supposed to do. We have started doing trainings. The DG Nothing has submitted to customs some training manuals, which we are also looking at, and we're also using it for our training. We are also gotten the relevant data, the tariff offers from the from ECOWAS and from the National Office of Trade Negotiation. We are already in the final stage of formulating our procedures in the system. And at this stage, we have since the rules of origin criteria for AFCFTA is a complex one. It is more specific, HS code specific. We have designed a small system that will be on our website anytime from now when they have looked at it and approved it, that traders will just put in the HS code of anything they want to export, and it will give them one. You tell them whether that HS code is correct, tell them whether it is tradable or not, tell them the criteria for rules of origin are the different strata of the harmonized system, and then the person will know what to do for that particular product. So this is what we have done. I'm just trying to summarize and go within the time limit that's been given to me. But in all that, we are ready. We are working different sectors. There's an office now and at headquarters, the trade facilitation and preferential trade rules of origin. I'm heading that unit. And also we are in consultation with National Action Committee that is set up by the president. So we are up to date. Thank you. Thank you.
So Jay, can you hear us now?
Yeah.
In 2 minutes, can you please tell us what the NESG can do to help with the implementation of AFCFTA?
Well, ours is in the area of data, ours is in the area of policy. So one of the things we will do is again to look at how does it affect Nigeria and where can Nigeria do well. And that's why, in the light of some of the reports we've said, but we need a lot around our infrastructure, we need a lot around our industrialization. But again, we need to let government know that, given the fact that government cannot provide all the funding required, there's a need for us to make ourselves sufficiently attractive to drive investment. So policy, monetary stability, private sector investment are those things that are important. And those are the things we'll continually put in the front of the burner. And to let government know that, yes, this is good, it will do us a lot of good, but we need to let other people come in and invest here in Nigeria. Because like we all said, if we don't get right in Nigeria, other people are getting it right. Investment is going elsewhere. In the last 2-3 months, we've seen investment going into South Africa and even into our neighbor Ghana. And when this rule eventually works, we will then be importers. I hear the NOT acting DG saying that large market, yes, so a large market importing from other people, but what will we be exporting? It's important for us to make ourselves attractive so that we can be able to do that. And one other thing I talk about, the need to mine data and policy. One other thing I talk about, the impact of that on our citizens. Because if our citizens don't feel the benefit of CFTA, the likelihood is that they're going to rise up against it and say, no, we don't want it. Just as you were saying in other climes where people are rising up against globalization because they feel left behind. So as we look at all this, we should look at the implication of all of this and see how we carry all along. Thank you.
Any member of the panel can answer the questions. Just 3 questions. But there are no questions. You're happy what you heard? No? I can't see any. Any hands? Okay.
Good afternoon, honorable panel members. My name is Samuel Gunjabi. The impact of tourism and entertainment to Africa's growing economy and sustainable development goals of Africa cannot be emphasized. How can young African entrepreneurs maximize the opportunity of cross-border trading, which after has presented to drive industrialization, innovation, research, and United African Trade Congress? My question again, how can young African entrepreneurs maximize the opportunity of cross-border trading, which after has presented to drive industrialization, innovation, research, and United Trade Congress, and the significance of African indigenous language, like Yoruba, in Hausa, in success?
Thank you, Samuel. That's a great question and one that's really close to my heart. As you know, tourism and entertainment is one of the 6 pillars of development for the Lagos State government, this administration, entertainment and tourism. So our themes agenda, this is extremely critical. And you're right. So historically, if you look at growth, usually what they say is there are 3 sectors that follow each other. The first is telecoms. And on top of telecoms, then usually the technology ecosystem grows. And then the next ecosystem is the entertainment ecosystem. And we're seeing it here in Nigeria. So telecoms came in the 2000s, and we've seen the explosion of the digital and technology ecosystem over the past decade. Now we have, this decade is for entertainment and tourism. And the most amazing thing about that is that's the sector for the young. And Nigeria is more than 50% young. Lagos is more than 50% young. So this really is extremely critical and is something that needs to be supported. And you can see, I mean, again, the Grammys, Burna Boy, Wizkid, they just won Grammys. Ladisi also has Nigerian heritage. We're seeing what our movies are doing all over the world. And this really is the opportunity. So, I normally don't like to toot our horn, but we can see the best the state is making in the tourism and entertainment ecosystem, right from supporting in the time of the pandemic. So $1 billion fund that was put in place to support that sector because we know hospitality and entertainment were very hard hit. But beyond that, the creative academy that has been done in conjunction with the private sector and with a lot of the things we do, we try and do more and more with the private sector because we know that they are the real practitioners. What our role is to do is to enable them to do what it is that they can do so that it is more sustainable. So it doesn't become, oh, there's no more budget for this, is no longer a priority area, but you establish something with the private sector and they take the ball and run. You've seen what platforms like Iroko TV have done with amplifying our movies to the world. That really is the opportunity for young people. We can build these digital platforms. They're international platforms. We know that all over the world, people are hungry for Nigerian content. And, so entertainment content, we're seeing what's going on with the world of comedy. With the lockdown, Nigerian entertainers have refused to be held down. We're taking our music international digitally. We're taking our comedy international digitally. Let's also take our education international digitally. I can tell you for a fact that African and Black content is the next big thing. And you can see what Sim Shagaya is doing with ULesson. There's the opportunity to intervene in the education space. There's the opportunity, you mentioned languages. Now imagine if you have platforms. There's so many people who are abroad, who are looking to understand Africa, looking to learn Africa. We have BBC Pidgin, BBC Yoruba, BBC Hausa. Everybody is now beginning to want to understand the African. We are the current zeitgeist. And so what is the role of the content creators? Create animation, create our stories, tell our real stories. Let them know what it's really like here. Let's not just amplify bad news. Let's educate them on what Africa really is like, what Africans really are like. Share our values to the world. Create educational content so that our children who are here and abroad don't lose our languages. Our proverbs are powerful, there's so much that we can do. And the great thing about content is there is absolutely no limit. Finance into that, or Ijapa, the tortoise into that. There's no limit to how many of those things we can create and sell and sell. So imagine the revenue potential and imagine the impact on people of color all over the world, being able to see people like them creating content for them and by them and for them. So that really is the opportunity, and it scales, it goes across the borders. I mean, we have distribution platforms already, DSTVs across the entire continent. The movies can scale digitally, YouTube is there. So there is no limit, and that's actually one sector where there's no limit. So I think that really is the opportunity, and I encourage you and every young Nigerian to go out there and tell our stories. Thank you.
The heads of states that ratified this agreement recently didn't think it was going to be easy. You don't give birth to a baby today and see the baby running tomorrow. There has to be a period for milestone development. But the important issue is to have a dream, to hold on and work on it. Africa has been brainwashed to think what is African is bad. When you say this is made in Nigeria, oh, that's bad. This is made in Europe, that's good. That's brainwashing. It did happen a few years ago when I was growing up with Chinese products. They keep being rejected as poor products. These days, some of the best products are Chinese. We must be optimistic, not pessimistic, because we cannot over-rely on foreigners. Look at the COVID era and what has just happened. How did the over-reliance of external forces on our trade affect us? Most of the African economies are on their knees because we never envisaged this coming. We must wake up to enhance cross-border trade. There are many factors. It's not going to be easy. We must silence our guns. We must look at our democracies, our values, and accept to be one people and move forward and keep working on it. I believe we are being to think like we think because the world is afraid of the population increase rate in Africa, which is exponential compared to Europe, which has a negative population growth, manpower to man whatever they have started, They're afraid of Africa. There are many theories coming up at how Africa is supposed to be destroyed. Do we sit, kneel, and wait for that to happen? Time is now. Africa must unite on all spheres, and trade not exclusive.
Thank you very much, Excellence. There are two questions from a chat box. One, how will the African be tapped into as a strategic partner for the panelists?
Yeah, once again, one thing that I think the SDG advisor, and of course, Your Excellency did not mention, which I just want to add, but she mentioned it earlier in our conversation, was fintech, financial technologies. This is really key in terms of cross-border trade. Nigeria has comparative, and of course, competitive advantage when it comes to finance, across Africa. Our banks are everywhere across Africa. So I think young people cannot take advantage of that to build credible, secure financial platforms. For instance, the flutterware, which the SDG mentioned earlier. Having said that, I think we need to, under the AFCFTA phase 2 negotiations, which would kickstart any time from now. And of course, let me just say this as a caveat, that my office has sent out requests for position papers and for memoranda to be submitted electronically on the protocol on intellectual property rights, protocol on investment, sustainable investment, protocol on competition policy, and protocol on e-commerce. So you can meet me later or meet any of my colleagues to get our email and contact to send us position papers and memoranda on those. The reason why I've mentioned these is that these are the pillars for industrialization. As you know, in Africa, Nigeria included, we don't have a strong framework on intellectual property rights. You have cases where you experience and you hear people talk about IPR theft everywhere. For instance, Nollywood, or for authors in Nigeria. I mean, before any movie is out, I mean, it would have been pirated 1,000 times, and that affects, of course, the benefits that the creators or the creatives are supposed to derive from their intellectual work and innovation. Now, how the diaspora community can help is to work with Africa to address these, because I do know that you do have very strong capacity among the diasporans across the world who can work with Africa to strengthen these. Another area would be to work on removal of market access restrictions and barriers where our goods and of course services can go into those markets. For instance, the US markets, the EU markets, the Asian markets. We have a diaspora, African diaspora all over the world, and they can work with countries across the world to ensure that those barriers are removed. For instance, I did mention standards and quality. As you recall, some of you are aware that the EU has extended 3-year ban on our beans that they cannot go into the EU. So our diaspora community can work with us to address those issues within the EU and look at the standards and quality requirements, and then work with the locals here to see how that local farmers, for instance, or producers of food or drugs, and the drug administration and food administration organs of government, of course, the private body as well, to ensure that capacity on standards and quality would be strengthened in order for our goods and services to qualify entry into those markets. And we can also, the diaspora can also work with us to, someone just asked a question on how the youth can take advantage of cross-border trade. there are high potentials when it comes to services in relation to cross-border trade and of course consumption abroad as well. Cross-border trade, what you can do is, if you are a young entrepreneur focusing on technology, creating platforms that drives in technology innovations, and you can then link up, you can create linkages with those diasporans abroad to see how they can look for instance, venture capitalists to fund your firm or to fund your innovation or to fund your research. There are venture capitalists out there looking for young enterprising Africans to actually support and to also invest into the innovations and businesses. So I think there are lots of ways that I think the diasporans can actually participate in the AFCFTA. And I engage with them on a daily basis on how they can come in and partner with Africa and of course Nigeria to see how we can make this a successful journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. The last question, actually, I would like the two high commissioners here to answer it. So when will people be able to move from one location to another in African continent? If goods are able to move, why not people?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If goods, capital, and services are able to move from one country, why not people? It's $1 million question. It's a question of commitment also. To what extent are our leaders, elected and appointed, capable of designing policies that are facilitative to people to move from one country to another without hassles? That is a question of commitment. That's why I challenge it. We talk the talk, but do we move, do we leave the talk? Do we walk the talk? It's about 60 years plus now that you have been hearing stories and talks about deepened, broadened, strengthened African integration. But where are we today? If you look even along the blocks we have, a block of 6 countries, people are not able to move freely from one country to another, just because of sheer policies that are not pro-African unity, are not pro-Pan-Africanism. These are the things that we need to change. And the change does not necessarily come from above. The electorate, the citizenry, the conscious and responsible citizen should be able to champion the cause of a united Africa. When we talk of African continent free trade area, we talk of ECOWAS, we talk of East African Community, SADC, Commerce, and what you have. The thing is that these bodies belong to the top leadership. Our leaders, we should come together, civil society organizations, of commerce, religious bodies, conscious citizens, students' movement, and argue the case for a true African integration, much as Nigerians today are talking about true federalism. We should not leave these bodies, integrative bodies, to be owned by politicians. We should create a situation in which regional bodies, integrative frameworks at the institution and legal level are owned by the people, for the people. That's when Africa will move a step further to what we can call true integration and therefore true movement of people from one country to another without hurdles. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
In the last century, the first half of the last century, there was the scramble for Africa. Creation of arbitrary borders, cutting across even communities that were similar. At whose benefit? Then we were made to believe in policies that were never African. And given a definition of democracy that was never African. Must retrace our roots. Are those the borders we wanted in Africa? Yes, COVID, smallpox, other SARS can prevent us from crossing one border country to the other. But not sheer political inclination. At one time we were told south, east, west. God knows what will come now. We must wake up. What are the factors that prevent us from crossing from one country to the other? Are they arbitrary factors, or they are important factors that should give the African mind to think? Just because one country is pro-Europe, another country is pro-East, you don't cross borders. That's nonsense. Why are we Africa? Why can't we be independent, not only in political, but also in our minds? Goods crossing, yes, we will call it in Swahili magendo, black market. Because that's why we didn't cross those goods through Europe back to Africa. Kenya has to export to Europe to be imported. We have to pour our milk down during the rainy season because Nigeria must import its milk from Europe. We export our coffee and tea to Europe without
to ensure that this project becomes a reality. What do we gain? Of course, a lot to gain. It's very clear from the discussion here that we have not shown enough commitment as Africans to see this work. I want to therefore thank the President and this Council, for arranging this program. I know SCCI is the foremost Chamber of Commerce in Sub-Saharan Africa and the second oldest in Africa. But we know that you are the most active Chamber of Commerce in Africa. So we expect this to be done by you. But there's still a lot to be done. That's what we are saying here today. So I want to beg the President, beyond this program, we need to do a lot more things to create awareness of why things should move forward quicker than we expect. Because we started very late to get Africa together. And it's very clear now that if we can get this right for our trade to work this way, for goods and services to move without any hindrances, then we can get our people to move within Africa without any hindrance. This could be a way to start off. And I want to agree entirely that we must put all efforts to ensure that AFC, FTA becomes a reality. I want to appeal that this country, Nigeria, because of who we are and our pedigree, we must take leadership of this. Of course, we must do this with humility and not with arrogance, because we are big and we are dense, therefore we must be bigger. We must organize other people to see the truth about why Africa to trade with ourselves. Otherwise, we will have issues ahead of us. We now say that AFCFTA is a work in progress. As we are now, there's still a lot to be done to make this happen. So I want to beg all those people in government and of course our business leaders that we need to move very fast so as to get this project to become a reality. I want to also warn that we must be prepared for antagonism from those who don't like us. It's not impossible that those who have held us down so far of not doing business with each other, but working with America, with Europe, Asia, we still want to be so. Because the more we do business together as Africans, the less we depend on that. And that will be in our interest. So we must build in shocks and balances to ensure that when such things come, we don't be able to address them. So let's be clear for the challenge to come. Because it's already on the way, because they are already planning what we do to solve these gaps. So the ones who are together as a continent, they will get stronger, will get bigger, and get bolder. And then we'll depend less on them. On this note, I want to say thank you to President Mr. for this program. I want to say a big thank you to the DG of the Nigerian Office for Trade Negotiations, Mr. Continental, for his very, very able remarks. Of course, Mr. Francis Anochogo, Secretary, National Committee for the AFCTA, for standing here for the Minister for Trade and Investment. Thank you very much, Mr. Wankele Mene, the SG of OFC FTA, for that very impressive presentation. That's your project. So we expect you to try and work and face the challenges that may come your way and see that this project becomes a reality for Africa. We could not have had a better panelist than what we have here today. And we are very proud of the very able Prof. Can't be anything less. Prof from LBS is a prof from anywhere. So Professor Chris, thank you very much for being a very good moderator. I will also encourage the High Commissioner of Kenya to Nigeria, our very good friend and brother, Ambassador Dr. Wilfred Matthew, very aggressive commitment in him for what you are saying. And we need more people like you to pass the message across to other people who don't believe in why Africa should come together. So thank you very much. Then Mr. Lawi Jayola, the CEO of Nigerian Economic Summit Group, thank you for your support and for your participation. Then advisor to my state governor on SDGs, Mrs. Shalake Hamad. Thank you very much for being here. You can see what we do in Lagos. That's quality of Lagos. That was a very impressive outcome. The representative of Nigerian Customs, Mr. Anthony Ayako, thank you very much also. Of course, we can't forget a very good friend and brother here. A wonderful team. We are proud of you, and please take the message away and fight the battle for Africa, because there's a lot ahead with this war. War is very key. I want to thank the audience, because if they are here and not there, then they will go back. I want to also thank the press for the good work we've done so far for the chamber. Please stay blessed and keep yourself.
Of the industry. And close, please, I would like to invite members of the panel and the president of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry for a brief photograph session. Madam President. Also, the Deputy President, please join. Your time and your presence. And on this note, we have come to the end of this program. The FCTA roadmap to a successful implementation. On behalf of the President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we would like to
Mr. Chris.